I would like to introduce Dr. Jennifer Norris. Hopefully she's here on Zoom.
I'm here.
Thank you. She's going to speak on the theme Accelerating Conservation. She has extensive experience in conservation policy, endangered species protection, and ecosystem management. Governor Newsom announced the appointment of Dr. Norris in May of 2020 as Deputy Secretary for Biodiversity and Habitat at the California Natural Resources Agency. She is responsible for overseeing the state's biodiversity strategy and will explain something that I don't understand: landscape scale restoration through partnerships. Today, she will talk about the pathways to the 3030 strategy document, which was just released in April. And we are, I think Reggie is going to put a link to that document in our chat. Please welcome Dr. Jennifer Norris.
Well, hi, everyone. Thank you for having me virtually and in person. It's really nice to see so many people that care about democracy on a Sunday. This is great. So I'm going to share my screen, assuming I've got the power to do that. Like I do. Just give me 1 second. Should get the full screen in a second, hopefully. Come on, PowerPoint. There we go. Can everybody see that? We all set?
Yep.
Somebody give me a thumb. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you all for being here. I appreciate the opportunity to tell you about the really exciting work that's happening across California and hopefully get you excited to be part of it if you're not already. So as mentioned, my name is Jennifer Norris. I'm the first ever Deputy Secretary for Biodiversity and Habitat, which is kind of a cool title, you have to admit. And I was appointed to help us really drive our biodiversity and conservation agenda across the state. Obviously, there's really amazing conservation that already happens, but this governor wants to take it to the next level. And that's part of what I have the great privilege of doing. So as was mentioned, in October 2020, Governor Newsom signed his so-called Nature-Based Solutions Executive Order, N8220. And this executive order is actually 5 or 6 pages long, and it contains a whole lot of strong statements and commitments by the state to really deploy nature in the fight against climate change, both using our lands to sequester more carbon, but also to build resilience to the effects of climate change moving forward. And as part of that executive order, California was the first state in the nation and preceded the federal government's commitment to conserve 30% of our lands and coastal waters by 2030. And 30 by 30 is part of an international movement. There are now over 90 countries that have made this commitment to save 1/3 of our planet, really to protect the life support systems that we rely on. If you think about it, you know, we need the biosphere actually to clean our air, to clean our water, to make our food. And so protecting nature is part of protecting us, but it's also a key tool in the toolbox against climate change. So after 2020, after October, we spent about a year plus in a massive amount of public engagement. We had regional workshops all over the state. We had workshops diving into questions of how do you use lands to protect biodiversity and to advance climate change? What does it mean to conserve? We had online questionnaires. We met with over 70 tribal California Native American tribes, and we had consultations. We got thousands of letters. We got feedback from all over. We had an advisory committee, and then we had public meetings on our draft. All of that background can be found at our website that we created over the year as well, called californianature.ca.gov. And I really encourage you to check that out. It's got all the webinars that you ever want. You probably won't want to watch them, but lots of really good information there. And we used all of that to put out a draft document, and then ultimately our final, which was released in on Earth Day, on April 22nd. So this Pathways to 30 by 30 California, Accelerating Conservation of California's Nature, we released that on Earth Day. We also released a pretty groovy online interactive mapping tool that I'll talk about in a minute. And we laid out a series of proposed investments that are going to help us achieve 30 by 30. And I'm going to walk through all those pieces now. So our overarching approach to 30 by 30, it's grounded in a few key objectives. You know, what are we conserving for? Ultimately, 30 by 30 is about protecting and restoring biodiversity. Fundamentally, its roots are in the biodiversity crisis and the need to protect, as I mentioned, the life support systems of the planet. But we also know that when we protect, nature, we can expand people's access to the outdoors. We can increase beautiful places that people can enjoy. And at the same time, as I mentioned, we can use those lands to both mitigate climate change and build resilience to its effects. Our conservation framework, our approach, also has some really core commitments that, if these probably look familiar because they're part of the governor's overarching agenda, which is that in every opportunity, we want to advance justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. We're working very hard to strengthen our tribal partnerships, and at the same time, protect our economic prosperity, our clean energy resources, and our food supply. So we're really looking at this holistically and not thinking about it in a silo. So what does it mean to conserve? This is actually the biggest question that we got over every single one of those 17 workshops. What does it mean? So we worked really hard and we put out a definition, and here's what it is. These are land and coastal water areas that are durably protected and managed to sustain functional ecosystems. Those can be intact or restored, and the diversity of life that they support. So to be a 30 by 30 conservation area, essentially you have to be a highly protected place, largely in its natural state. And this comes in a lot of forms, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So for lands, and we have a land target and an ocean target. We're currently using that definition. We've already conserved in California, 24% of our lands meet that definition, which is amazing. And this really can occur over a broad spectrum of landscapes. It includes dedicated conservation areas. Probably the places that come to mind for you are like national parks or wilderness areas. It also includes recreation lands and open spaces. If you think about regional open spaces and big regional parks. It also includes a lot of working lands, places that where we have some amount of extraction, whether it's light cattle grazing that maintains habitat, or some, if you think about forests that are sustainably managed. Those are a narrower category, but those opportunities exist as well. We also recognize the importance of protecting watersheds and the connectivity across all freshwater systems. And we also recognize that even if you don't meet that conservation, 30 by 30 conservation area definition, there's lots of other important conservation action that takes place across our state that adds value to those conservation areas. So that's lands. In our coastal waters, we're at 16%. Currently, all of our marine protected areas meet the definition that I mentioned. We're currently reviewing our marine protected area network across the state. They're the little tiny blue dots on your screen, which you might not be able to see along the coast, but there are a lot of them. We're currently reviewing them and looking at the doing a scientific analysis of how effective they've been in really protecting ecosystems. So we're waiting for that to finish. Whether we'll have more marine protected areas is a question mark. But we know, because the Biden administration, after Governor Newsom signed his executive order, made a similar commitment to 30 by 30. They're moving forward on some important national marine sanctuaries off the coast. And that's a great opportunity for us to work together with the feds and conserve some other coastal waters. So we laid out 10 pathways to 30 by 30, which is really a suite of approaches that we can take in parallel to achieve the remaining 6 million acres of lands and 500,000 acres of coastal waters. So fundamentally, number one is really to accelerate regionally led conservation. We recognize that all conservation is local. It's really driven by locals. Opportunities are identified by locals. So we want to lift up regionally led conservation and use what locals have identified to execute more strategic land acquisitions, increase voluntary conservation easements, work with federal partners to enhance conservation on existing public lands, not just federal, but state and local existing public lands, We want to institutionalize advanced mitigation. These are lands that are protected sort of to make up for the effects of development. We want to make sure that those are done strategically. We want to do more restoration because we can't really conserve our way out of the biodiversity crisis. We've destroyed a lot of ecosystems down to single digits percentage of what was historically there. Wetlands come to mind. So restoration is really important. We need to work better among governments, and this is particularly true about our tribal partners. Make sure that our investments are maximally aligned. Promote those complementary conservation measures that I talked about that are the matrix in which all these other areas exist. And then make sure that those places that we're protecting are actually delivering what we said, and make sure that the management adapts to any changes that are needed, particularly as climate change moves forward. I mentioned this online GIS. I don't know how many people in the room are map people. I can see you. Can anybody raise a hand? Oh, I got some hands. Good. So this is super cool if you're a map nerd, but even if you're not, my mother has checked out this site. She loves it. So it's actually designed in such a way that if you know nothing about GIS or if you're a super user, there's sort of 3 levels of knowledge. But what this system does, and it's at that website, californianature.ca.gov, and I can put that in the chat. It allows us to look across the state. So up in this right corner, this black and green map, that's a map of all the conserved areas in California currently. And what you can do is overlay on top of that layers like what's in the right below it, which is where we have high levels of biological diversity across the state. You can overlay those. And then you can overlay the effects of climate change. What are future temperature conditions, or what's precipitation going to look like, or how does sea level rise impact this particular area? And then you can also compare it to how much access those places have. So then you can use that map to identify, as a local partner, places in your region that you might want to conserve, that you can push farther on biodiversity. Maybe they're adjacent to an existing conservation area, so you get a larger bang for the buck. Maybe it's a wildlife crossing like the one we just opened at Agoura Hills or broke ground on. So this is a super cool thing. I totally encourage you to check it out. It's a lot of fun, and I think it's going to be a really important tool, and it will allow us to track our progress toward reaching our goal. So moving forward, we just finished the big document, and we're getting ready to really launch implementation. And as I said, we really see our regional coalitions and partners as the key boots on the ground. At the same time, our tribal partners are key to the success of this project, and they have knowledge that, frankly, we want to, hope that they will share with us on how to do this better. We also have a couple of existing organizations, the California Biodiversity Council, which has existed since the 90s. It's a federal, state, and local government coalition that comes together to share information. We see this as a really important network right now to help us advance 30 by 30, since, as I said, the federal government is also pursuing the same. There's also something called the California Biodiversity Network, and these are practitioners across the state who've really been championing the need for biodiversity conservation and really advancing the science and the how-to. That's over 400 strong now, helping us identify science needs and making sure that the analysis is done well. As well as within the California Natural Resources Agency, all of our departments and conservancies like the Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Department of Parks and Recreation, the Baldwin Hills Conservancy, I could go on. So we're going to establish this 30 by 30 partnership and really draw from those different organizations and help advance this goal over the next 8 years. I'll just mention that there are a couple of key appendices also in that document. Don't just look at the main one. Appendix A is actually, this map shows you, I said there were 9 regional workshops. We looked all over the state and talked to people sort of virtually, but in those places, and said, what's different about your place? What are the conservation opportunities? What strategies work? What are the challenges you face? And we consolidated that into that Appendix A. So it gives you a little insight into the different parts of the state. We identified, of all the 10 pathways, what are the key actions within those that we want to really dig into in the next couple of years. Appendix C is programs that the federal government and the state government share that are really going to help us drive on 30 by 30. We have a couple of science appendices from those science organizations, and we've got a whole list of existing conservation plans, people that have put together plans already that are just ready for funding and can be implemented right now. So the big excitement too, and we're right now in the middle of budget season, which I'm sure you're all aware of. We just released our proposal for how to spend $768 million over the next couple of years. So in that pot of 768, we recommend, we're asking for 375 of that to go to really accelerating implementation, to go to those easements and acquisitions I mentioned. 231 to help local regional organizations build their own plans, implement their own plans. We have a youth climate leadership program. We've set aside, recommended $100 million to develop our tribal partnerships and really help tribes with land acquisition, help them build their own land trusts, and really work with them in partnership to advance 30 by 30 as well as other climate work. Some other strategic investments like making sure this groovy website keeps going. And this is on top of
the end goal of becoming brothers and sisters. Each week they meet up for their pledge meeting where they'll get an assignment, and the successful completion of the assignment will take them one step closer to.
I'm not sure what to do. Somebody else is talking.
I'm sorry, just a minute.
Everybody else should be muted.
I'm almost done, I promise. This is my last slide, I think. So this 768 is on top of last year's budget, which had 600 million for coastal resilience, another 645 for habitat restoration, 105 million for wildlife crossings. So the point I want you to take away from this slide is that we're well over $2 billion invested in conservation under this governor, and it's really exciting. This is unprecedented, the amount of commitment to protect nature. We've never seen anything like this before, and it's really a big thrill. And that's the end. So I'm gonna stop sharing. I already see a hand, which is good. Thanks for your attention, and I'll take any questions you have. Mehran? I don't know how to say your name, I'm sorry. Is that close? Mehran?
He's muted.
Oh, there you go.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
My question has to do with water, both on the conservation side and also on additional ways to get water for California. So if you had to list, what are the top 3 conservation things that we as individuals can do? And what I see all these suggestions of pipelines from other parts of the US or desalination plants or reservoirs for containing runoff, but they all seem to come down to being too costly. I mean, what is the solution?
Well, I think if you want to dig into that topic, you should invite my counterpart, Nancy Vogel. She's our Deputy Secretary for all things water. We did just announce a gigantic drought package on Friday, and I don't even know all the details of that because it's its own universe of amazing. But they do have within there, I know for sure, investments in additional storage projects, investments in restoration projects that will help us actually capture more groundwater and store it. There's a whole suite, and it's in the billions of dollars. So I can probably find the link to where that is. I can tell you that everybody should be conserving as much water as possible. I can tell you that every day. That is true. Every day you should wake up. It doesn't matter if it rains today or it doesn't. We are in a bad way right now in California across the whole state. And if we have another dry year, it's going to be brutal. There are already communities that are running out. And there are places in the Central Valley where they're just digging deeper and deeper wells, and there are communities without any water. So that is something to be taken seriously. But the details of that, I wish I was an expert, but I'm not. But it's a big deal. Should I read the questions in the chat?
Yeah, there was one in chat.
What about conservation of animals?
I'm sorry?
Conservation of animals.
Could you come up closer?
The question was, what about conservation of animals?
Yeah, so when I say biodiversity, that's what I'm definitely talking about. But it's the whole universe. It's animals, it's all the plants, it's soil, healthy soil microbes that keep our soil working and capturing water. So this whole suite recognizes that. And we build on the Department of Fish and Wildlife's, those maps that I mentioned. They have really amazing inventory of all the biological diversity across the state and where we have hotspots that need protecting. So that's what this is for, is protecting space for animals and all the species that they interact with to persist.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
I can.
Hi. So first of all, thank you for coming and a brilliant presentation. This
Oh,
is like
thank you.
the most important topic that there is. If I'm understanding correctly, this particular project or group that you're involved in, you're dealing strictly with land that is already set aside. Is that pretty much true? Because one of the things that I've been listening to a lot lately is this idea that tilling is bad for our environment. You know, like massive agricultural tilling, that regenerative agriculture will help to bring down our carbon emissions and not create these huge, carbon emissions at the time. And that a lot of commercial agriculture uses tillage, and also just the way that we farm livestock in groups, these huge groups, rather than mixing them and doing things in the old fashioned way. Also just looking at a lot of the rewilding efforts that have been occurring in Europe and in Scotland. I'm involved in one there. I'm hoping that we do more and more of that here, where we work on rewilding and put a lot of our budget there. So anyway.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I love the rewilding, and I've been part of 2 exciting new wildlife crossing events in the last couple of weeks. One down there in Santa Monica, another one in the Santa Cruz Mountains. I mean, just giving animals the opportunity to cross freeways. I mean, we did the event next to the freeway, the 10-lane freeway. And I was like, how did any animal ever cross this? It's impossible. I mean, it's terrifying. So really exciting that we're investing in those projects finally and giving animals the freedom to roam. I'm glad you brought up, though, about agriculture. I should have mentioned that at the same time that we were writing this 30 by 30 pathways document, another colleague of mine, Amanda Hansen, and you might consider inviting her down to talk to you. She, in parallel with me and worked through a lot of these same workshops, wrote what is called our Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy. And that's a mouthful, but what it is all the different kinds of land management actions that are possible that we can take across all landscapes in California to help both increase our carbon stock, in the lands, protect it from carbon, emissions, but also build resilience to climate change. So I encourage you to check that out. If you go to the website I mentioned, that document is linked there as well.
Thank you very much. And if you wouldn't mind, it's in the chat, right? The californianature.ca.gov.
Yep. And I think her document's there now. I'm starting to doubt myself, but I'll put our website there as well, because both of them are linked on the main California resources page. I can type.
Thank you. Just sharing with everyone, one of the things that got me very excited about this was watching a movie off the ground about
your tummy.
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
She's having a reaction thing, and she's listening on her neck too.
We're having Zoom problems. Everybody mute, except the person asking the question.
We got it.
So we have a question here in person too. I don't know.
Can you?
Yeah.
I see where you showed your budget number, and then I've been reading about California having this huge surplus. And what I was wondering is, who determines how much of that budget number you get?
Yeah, so the way it works, and I've had to learn it because I came over from the federal side, is that just like in the federal government, the governor puts out his vision for how to allocate the budget. The legislature will have theirs. So that happens in January when the governor puts it out, but then in May, there's what they call the May revision, because it's after the taxes have come in and we say, oh, there's less, there's more. So that's what happened on Friday, was the governor's May revision came back out. But then it's a negotiation with the legislature. They could say, forget it, nothing for nature, 0. Or they could say 10 million, 10 billion, you know, it's all in negotiation, and then that will be finally decided. So over the next 6 weeks, that will be happening locally, and that's an opportunity for democracy. You know, if you have things that you care about, the budget is really where people's values get expressed. And so always let your people know what matters to you, because that's really where we set the agenda for the next year or two.
This is the PD Democrat.
I see Alan has a hand up.
Yeah, it's sort of timely, your thing you mentioned about water. I want you to carry this piece of data back
Okay.
to your water person. I've got my sister-in-law is visiting here, and she lives at the base of right next right off of 395,
Oh,
right
okay.
below Mount Whitney. And well, Crystal Geyser has 3 plants, 3 commercial plants.
Hmm.
The most recent one that they built, they've got a limit of 200 plus thousand gallons per day withdrawal.
Wow.
And they're just pumping merrily. The other 2 plants they've got have no restrictions, and they're running full bore 24/7. Best I can tell. And it's, you know, there's only one aquifer, and right next to that is the Good Dry Lake, which we spend a whole ton of money trying to keep the dust down.
Yeah.
And the aquifer underneath that Crystal Geyser gets a free pass, and they're running it dry. So anyway, I'd like to see some action, some goal to put some control on people like Crystal Geyser.
Yeah. I mean,
Sucking a spot.
I will share with you that I worked for a long time in water in New Mexico and California, and it's not like land, right? You can't,
Nope.
It's really more complicated. The rights are complicated. You have to do it for 150 years before you understand it. So I would just say that's an important thing to tell your legislator, you know, that is an important issue for you. Also, don't buy bottled water. Just don't. I'm just telling you, don't. I don't care if that's not apolitical, just don't do it. You're putting fresh water into bottles made from oil, and then you're driving them all over the planet. That is just like bad on every level. We have good water in America. Let's just use our taps. But in any case, I would encourage you to let people know. I will pass it along to mine.
Thank you. Thank you.
Kiss the Ground. Yes, that's a great documentary. Totally agree. And we've talked with some of those folks. They're very excited about our work. We're working together, and they're helping a lot with this climate smart strategy.
Great. Thank you.
Hi, I guess I got the next question. My name is Doug Bender, and it's actually, I'm a huge fan of 30 by 30, and hopefully you'll get to 50 by 50. And it's actually at my suggestion that you're the speaker today.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me.
I've put my money where my mouth is. I've been doing a lot of things with Earthwatch and so on. But so I have maybe 3 questions. You can choose which one you want to answer.
Okay, I got my pencil out.
Okay, so first of all, when you talk about restoring, what year would you like to restore to? Like, I don't think we're going to go back to when before American Indians were here. We're not going to resurrect ground sloths. Probably not to before white men were here either. So that'd be one question. Like, how far back, or maybe just freeze things where they are, but make them where they were a few years ago. That's kind of where I think. Second is, how tied in are you to the global Half Earth Society and what they're doing at global mapping and so on, and figure out where the optimal land bridges are? I mean, you know, bridges and stuff like that. And the third question is, how do you do cost trades? Like that bridge we're talking about at Agoura Hills, 95 million. Of course, it was private money, so can't criticize, but it's probably not the most cost-effective way to spend 95 million. So when you have a certain budget, how do you figure out where's the best place to put that money? Choose 1 out of 3, maybe.
Well, I mean, I can answer them all quickly. I mean, restoration, really, we're talking about getting back to functional ecosystems. So we're usually taking places that are, you know, a weed patch and getting them healthier and bringing them back to, you know, what is adjacent to it. So the ones that I've seen are usually restored wetlands, and we're trying to make them look a lot like the wetlands that are functioning nearby. So it's not a specific date. I would say part of the global movement that California is getting an incredible amount of appreciation and love globally. I'm now getting asked to speak like all over the world. So that's kind of cool. Like, California's out there in the front. So we're very excited. And we're trying right now just to get the rest of the international community to commit to 30 by 30. But yes, there's the Half Earth movement. I've been part of some of those conversations. I think they're a great inspiration. But we need to have people see how important it is to get to 30. And the last one about money, yes, wildlife crossings are extremely expensive for a small amount of acreage, but they actually make all the other acreage, that's on both sides of them a lot more functional and usable by a much broader array of species. So well-placed wildlife crossings, as expensive as they are, can be really game-changing for, mountain lions is a great example for the one that we just broke ground on, but so many other species will use that. And so I think that's super exciting. Ideally, we don't have to make those kinds of trade-off decisions. A lot of conservation is opportunistic. You got a willing seller, you have the right local community ready to get it done. And if you've got commitment, investments like we have here, and the programs we're investing in are all over the state. So it's not like there's just one pot of money, and I think if we show success, hopefully we'll get more and keep going. But there are lots of opportunities to leverage those funds federally and with mitigation dollars and private money. So I'm hopeful that we don't have to make those choices, but I hear you. And the way we want to do it really is to use these maps to say, like, what is the most important place in this area that we need to go after and get those protected before it's too late.
Well, I think we need to move on.
Yeah, I've taken up a lot of time. You guys have a good meeting, I guess.
Yes.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
Appreciate it. And in chat, we will have her website, and hopefully on our website, Reggie will post the links that Dr. Jennifer Norris suggested, right, Reggie?
Yes.
Okay.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Anyway,
Take
thank you.
care. Bye.